Man. UFC 287, Pereira versus Adesanya 2. Now, bear in mind, this is their second fight in MMA. They had already fought twice before in kickboxing. We're going to get to that fight last. We're going to talk about quite a few fights on this stacked pay-per-view card. Before we get to the fights that we have on our agenda, are there any other fights or fighters that you guys want to spotlight for the listeners and viewers?
No, I think I'm good.
I'll give you one. Opening bout of the card. Sam Hughes against the debuting Jacqueline Amarim. Might be Amarim. I'm not 100% sure how you say it. But she is the LFA champion. She has had 6 fights. And through those 6 fights, she has 5 submissions, 1 knockout, and has never seen the second round. So she is a real deal prospect, a real deal grappler, and definitely pay attention to her debut against Sam Hughes.
Okay. Let us begin with the featured bout on the early prelims. Cynthia Calvillo versus Lupita Godinez in the women's strawweight division. So we have Calvillo, the 35-year-old out of San Jose, California, 9-5 with 1 draw, 2 knockouts, 3 subs. She is very badly looking to get back in the win column on a 4-fight losing streak going into this pay-per-view bout, losing to Chukagian Andrade, Andrea Lee, and Nina Nunes. She will be sitting across from Lupita Godinez, Lupi, the 29-year-old out of Mexico, 5'2", 8-3 as a pro, 6 decision wins. Also looking to get back in the win column after a UD loss to Angela Overkill Hill. Omar, start us off here. Give us your take and your pick of Lupi Godinez taking on Cynthia Calvillo.
So I'm noticing now that this fight is at strawweight. Are they both now back at strawweight?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So the first thing is they both need to make weight because at least Cynthia has had issues in the past when it came to that stuff. That's kind of the whole reason why her record is kind of in the shitter as it is, because she keeps having to go up and down, up and down, up and down, and fighting girls that she shouldn't really be fighting at this point size-wise. I don't know if I have as much confidence in Calvillo anymore like I used to. I thought she had a lot of promise and a lot of potential. But even in the fights that she's fighting, she's a scrapper and she has I feel like the attitude for it, but I don't think the skills are matching up and they're not translating properly. Lupi Godinez is not a fighter that can't be beaten by any stretch of the imagination. But I think she might be able to edge this one out. I don't even want to say that she's more talented than Cynthia Calvillo because I don't know. I don't think I believe that. But I do think that she might have potentially more of a proper handle on how to get a win here as opposed to Calvillo. I think she might run into a little bit more. Calvillo might run into some more roadblocks than Godinez will overall. I do expect a hard-fought fight. I wouldn't even be surprised if this turns into a split decision somewhere down the line with how back and forth this fight might end up going. But I'm going to go with Godinez here by split decision.
Okay, Mark.
So she's a decent favorite, Lupi. She is minus 275. Cynthia Calvillo is plus 225, which shows you just how much faith people have lost in Cynthia Calvillo.
Yeah. Wow.
She does finally make her return to strawweight here. We have all, I think, collectively always thought that flyweight was not the right spot for her. I guess she, had some trouble making strawweight, but she is back now. Will she make the weight? That's its own question. I guess we will see. She will have a 2-inch height and a 3-inch reach advantage on Lupi. And in Lupi, she gets, what feels like a winnable matchup record-wise. Lupi's kind of been up and down. But generally the downs have been when she gets someone who she cannot get into the grappling with. And Cynthia is going to 100% be in the grappling. She couldn't keep it standing if she wanted to. She's probably going to look to grapple anyway. So we're going to be there. And as much as I want to say, like, I think Cynthia gets back on track at strawweight because, the talent that she once showed down there, it's hard to believe in her right now. And I don't think it happens. I think Lupi is maybe stronger than her. I think she's still improving, whereas Calvillo seems like she's been going the other way. I think Lupi's willing to push a pace just as much as Calvillo is, which kind of takes away one of Calvillo's weapons that she has over some girls. And I think she can maybe just outwork and outgrind Calvillo just enough and kind of outpower her in some spots. So I think it'll be close. I am also saying Lupi Godinez split decision.
I think this is probably going to be it for Cynthia, too. I think after this, we might see her.
I agree. If she loses this, I think that's it.
Yeah, man, I'm also a fan of Lupi Godinez, and we are unanimous with this one, except that I will take her by a unanimous decision. I think she's going to work Calvillo, and it's going to be a pretty resounding win on the scorecards. I'm going to say Lupi Godinez 30-27 across the board. Okay, let's move on to the middleweight division. Gerald Meerschaert taking on Joe Pyfer. Am I saying that right, Pyfer?
Yep.
Okay, GM3 is the 35-year-old out of Wisconsin. He has the same number of wins as his age. He's 35-15, 27 wins by submission. This man knows what he's doing in the grappling department. He's coming off a win against Bruno Silva back in August. He'll be standing across from Joe Pyfer. I love his nickname, Body Bags with a Z. 26-year-old out of Pennsylvania, 10-2 as a pro with 7 knockouts, 2 submissions. Only one of his 10 wins has gone the distance, and he's riding a 3-fight professional win streak, having won his final fight at Cage Fury, won on the Contender Series, and won his UFC debut back in September. Mark, start us off here. Give us your take of Pyfer versus GM3.
Okay, so Pyfer, despite being the more unproven fighter here, is the favorite. He's minus 200. GM3 is plus 160. There is a 2.5-inch reach advantage for GM3. He is 1 inch shorter height-wise. I tell you what, this is kind of a big jump for Joe Pyfer. I mean, he looked great in his debut, but it was Alan Amadovsky, who I think left the UFC at 0-4 after that fight. And we kind of skipped some steps here going to GM3. Like, he has wins over a lot of legit dudes. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights. Like, just quick, he subbed Bartosz Fabinski. He subbed Mahmoud Muradov, who's legit. He subbed Dustin Stoltzfus. He lost a decision to Christoph Jocko, okay? Then he subs friggin' Bruno Silva. Like, Gerald Meerschaert is a real deal dude. So they're kind of shuttling Joe Pyfer up the line here. And to see him as a minus 200 favorite, I don't know if that feels right to me. I do think he looked really good in his debut, showed a lot of good signs. I think maybe he'll come out hot, maybe landing solid on Meerschaert to start. We've definitely seen Meerschaert have to overcome some rough starts before. But I'm going to say he can find something like he always does. My concern is that Pyfer's a big physical dude. So maybe that makes it a bit more difficult for Meerschaert in the grappling to pull off the type of things that he normally can. But I've just seen it happen too many times, and I haven't seen enough to make me want to fully pull the trigger on Pyfer yet. So it just feels like a big step to me. I'll say GM3, round 3, sub.
Oh, baby. Omar.
Yeah, I kind of got similar vibes, man. You know, they're hyping up Pyfer pretty well. He's had a lot of good performances a good performance in the UFC, a good performance in the Contender Series. But those dudes are not the guys that he's fought are not even, in my opinion, on the level that GM3 is at. You know, and it's not to say Pyfer can't win this fight, but on paper, I don't know if I'm ready to bet against somebody who's been in there as much as Meerschaert has found success as much as Meerschaert has. So I'm going to ride the same train. I'm going to go with Gerald Meerschaert by submission, round 3.
That's twice we had the same pick in a row.
Same exact pick in a row.
Split decision and round 3 sub, back to back.
Yeah, man. I too will be going with GM3.
Wow.
I just love his experience, and I love his grappling prowess. I think he's going to turn this young guy back, as Mark says. Did you say that like originally, or did you hear that from somebody or other places? By the way,
No, that's the thing. Turn him back.
turn him back.
Someone on the rise, stop their rise, turn them back.
I agree that GM3 is going to get it done by submission. I'll say round 2.
Joe Pyfer is one of these guys that I feel like he's going to probably beat the shit out of Meerschaert for at least one of these 3 rounds.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same.
It might
Oh, the
very
guy can
well be
bang.
the first round too. Like he might go in there and really put the beat on Meerschaert for a little bit. But I think it's just going to get to a point where the experience will probably hold out, man. And I think, Meerschaert is one of these opportunistic grapplers that just finds the smallest opening to ruin your whole life. And I think he'll find it.
Okay. Women's, is this a strawweight bout? Yes.
Yes.
Fun one with Michelle Waterson Gomez taking on Luana Pinheiro. Waterson, no stranger to MMA fans, the karate hottie, the 37-year-old out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, 18-10 as a pro with 9 subs, 3 knockouts added to that. Looking to get back in the win column with back-to-back losses to Marina Rodriguez and Amanda Lemos. Fighting yet another Brazilian in Luana Pinheiro, 29-year-old out of Brazil, 10-1 as a pro, 2 knockouts, 5 subs added to that. And she's coming off of a win over Sam Hughes back in November of 2021. She won on Contender Series and is now 2-0 in the UFC. Mark, start us off. Give us your take. Pinheiro versus Waterson Gomez.
Okay, so Pinheiro is the favorite in this one. She is minus 170. Michelle Waterson is plus 140. These girls are the same size. You don't often get to say that in a fight featuring Michelle Waterson. It's a close fight. Waterson is obviously getting older, but I'm going to ride with her one more time. I think there's still enough talent there that she can take advantage of a chance against a girl who's the same size as her. Pinheiro hits harder, but I think Michelle can move. I think she can land more. I think she can mix in takedowns and gut out a win here. Maybe it's not even the most fan-friendly fight, but I think she can get it done. Not to mention, all her losses have been competitive fights against top girls. Like, it's not like she's lost it and she's getting ran through. These have all been competitive fights, so I'm not ready to say she loses this one. I think she turns back Pinheiro here. Waterson UD.
Okay.
Mike's not even paying attention to my usage of turns back.
I was going to ask you, did you let Mike know how old Michelle Waterson was, though? Because he needs to know.
She's 37. God,
37.
I'm never going to live this down. Oh, Mark, just say your pick. Bastard.
So I want to believe in the karate hottie still, she has been around for a long time. I was following her when she was still in Invicta, when the UFC was not even on the horizon for her and a variety of other women. So I've seen the growth in her game and things like that, and she's definitely become a lot more well-rounded. She's not the kind of, I don't want to say one-dimensional kickboxer she was before, because I don't think that's accurate, but she relied heavily on her kickboxing, earlier on in her career, and it gave her a lot of success. But I think over the years, she's had to adapt to a lot of the different styles that she's fought, and it's because she's fought some of the best of the best. Once you leave Invicta and they started bringing girls into the UFC from all over the place, all different types of division or organizations and whatever else, her game needed to step up, and she started including the takedowns and really working on the ground game. And to Mark's credit, some of her performances have been more exciting than others. But the girl still knows how to win against people, especially against people who are not the elite of the elite. Luana has a nice record. She's still early in her career, though, and I don't think I think this is going to be one of those moments where she realizes where the discrepancy in experience will really put somebody. I don't think talent-wise they're probably that much different from one another as far as their abilities are concerned, but I think Michelle Waterson, has a better understanding of how to use her talents and how to win a fight. and how to properly navigate through a 3-rounder here in the UFC. So I'm also going to go with Michelle Waterson Gomez. I will go by unanimous decision.
To me, this is a very tough fight to pick. I do think that it's going to be somewhat evenly matched, not only in size but in skill sets. I love the experience of Michelle Waterson, and I've always loved her skill set. She's always been one of the female fighters that I've always looked forward to seeing out in the octagon. Now I'm always so self-conscious about picking a younger fighter. God damn you! I'll go with Pinheiro just for parity's sake here. Fuck off, and I'll say she gets it done by UD. Moving on to the middleweights here. Kelvin Gastelum taking on Chris Curtis. Gastelum, the 31-year-old out of Arizona, 16-8 with 1 no contest, 6 knockouts, 4 subs. Looking to get back in the win column with back-to-back losses against Whitaker and Cannonier. Both of those fights happened in 2021. Chris Curtis will be standing across from the 35-year-old out of Cincinnati, Ohio. 30-9 as a pro with 17 knockouts, coming off a win by knockout over Joaquin Buckley back in December. Omar, start us off. Give us your take. Chris Curtis taking on the veteran Kelvin Gastelum.
This, for me, is in the card where my nipples will start to get hard because the rest of these fights here, man, are A1. For being honest, I'm a little surprised. I guess maybe not surprised, but like almost like a little disappointed for Curtis and Gastelum that they're getting this headlining spot of the prelims.
Chris Curtis was
Raul,
not thrilled.
He kind of came back and was like, I get it, but it's still kind of bullshit. You know, and that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I get it. I know what you're doing. You want to build the boy up, and
he's got a hell of a record, man. 30-9.
Yeah, but they want this Raul Rosas Jr. thing to pan out. I mean, this is the investment right now of 2023. Like,
to be fair, until it fell apart, Chiesa and the Leech weren't on the main card either. Like,
yeah,
that's what happens. It's a deep card.
It is a deep card. It is a deep card. And I hope Raul pulls it off, man. I mean, this is a big spot. We'll get to that. But Chris Curtis and Kelvin Gastelum, this is a fantastic fight. I can't even find the appropriate adjective for what kind of fight this is. But this is a damn good fight. From a skill perspective, I think they're very, very similar as far as what they can do. The games are a little bit different, right? Kelvin definitely likes to work on the ground when he gets the opportunity to. He is not afraid to strike with you. He's not afraid to stand with you. But if he sees an opportunity for a double leg, he's going to blast the shit out of you. Chris Curtis, on the other hand, is, I guess in that sense, a little bit more of a reactive fighter. Right, he will strike, he will get in there with you, but if he does sense that there is a takedown or something, he is well-rounded enough to stop them and kind of continue to move forward. But I don't think Chris Curtis is going to be going out of his way to throw, to shoot double legs on Kelvin or anything like that. I think if anybody's going to be initiating the ground game, I think it'll be Kelvin. With that being said, the pace that Chris Curtis can put on may very well be the defining factor in this fight. Kelvin, we all know, has decent cardio, but at the end of the day, we've also seen Kelvin slowly fade. And while Kelvin doesn't quit, and Kelvin is definitely one to keep going, his ability to win, I think, will begin to wane as the rounds continue to go. And this is only a 3-round fight. It's not like we have to worry about a 5-round fight like he had against Izzy. But I think Chris Curtis's pace, I think, is just going to be too much overall. And I think it's going to get worse as the rounds continue to go on. So I'm going to go with Chris Curtis by unanimous decision. I don't think he puts him out, but I think he does outwork him at least 2 out of the 3 rounds.
Okay, Mark.
Like it. Very tight odds. Kelvin Gastelum is the favorite. He is minus 130. Chris Curtis is barely plus money at plus 105. All right. 1-inch height and 4-inch reach advantage for Chris Curtis, which could be a factor. I think this is going to be a dogfight. I really hope I'm not wrong, but I really see it. Kelvin Gastelum loves to be in the pocket to score, and Curtis is so good there, and I think we might see fireworks here. I never, ever, ever pick Chris Curtis fights correctly. When this fight was made, I thought I was going to go Curtis just because of the inactivity and the weird injuries and just the general feeling of like, I don't know what the fuck is going on exactly with Kelvin Gastelum. But the more I think about the fight, I think Gastelum's going to get this done. I think that he may just be too much of a dog to be deterred by Chris Curtis. I think he can hang in the striking. He carries big power, which people tend to forget about Gastelum. I think he can mix in the wrestling if he needs it and maybe just present enough of a mixed bag that he can edge Chris Curtis. I'm a bit concerned that one of these Kelvin Gastelum fights is the one where he finally does break and we're like, oh, damn, like maybe this is the beginning of the end for Kelvin. Because he's been, you know, I'm trying to think, like 2010 started his UFC career? No, am I bugging? I feel like he's been around for ages.
You talking about Gastelum?
Yeah. Now I have to look.
Calvin's been around for a minute, especially having been in Tough.
I got to look now. Am I crazy?
Tough was 2013.
Wow.
Still,
all right, 2013. All right, I was a little bit
decade
off.
ago.
But still, yeah, fucking long time this man has been in there.
Yeah.
A lot of wars. So I'm a little afraid one of these days it's just going to happen. But I'm going to say it's not this one. I'm going to say it's not Chris Curtis. I think Gastelum can mix it up, land some big shots, win a decision. UD, Kelvin Gastelum.
Dude, his tough finale win over Uriah Hall was April 13th, 2013, a decade almost to the day.
Wow.
Of this
Dude,
event.
that was the first time I had spoiled something for Mark. That was the very first time I had ever spoiled a decision.
Did you really?
Or,
You
or
remember
a result.
that?
I remember it. I remember it because it was the first time, and I was like, and it was so fucking crazy. Because at that point, if you guys don't remember, if you didn't watch that season,
Wait, you
at the
spoiled
time,
Gastelum Hall for me?
I did.
Are you sure we knew each other?
How do
Yeah.
you remember that?
I'll tell
10
you why.
years ago we knew each other?
Yeah, that's how fucking crazy this is. I believe so. And the only reason I say that is because we were talking about we were talking about the whole Tough thing, but then it got to a point where I watched the fight. I think we had just started talking too, and I had just watched the fight, and I had texted you guys, I can't fucking believe Kelvin Gastelum just won Tough. And Mark was like, dude, what the fuck? I didn't even watch this shit yet. You just spoiled it. I remember this.
Wow.
I remember this. Good times. But yeah, for those of you who don't remember, Uriah Hall back then was being touted as like the next assassin in the UFC. And then he was just too nice of a guy to really have that killer instinct.
It's because speaking of, he like almost killed a guy on Tough.
But that dude should be selling fucking Ferraris somewhere. That dude should have never been a fighter.
Bro, I wish I could sell Ferraris. Shit.
That kid, I remember him talking to Adam something or another. He was like, I don't need to be here.
Yeah.
I've got a degree. I've got this. I've got that. I don't need to be here. I just really like fighting. And then he got roundhoused in the fucking mouth. And then where did he go? Gone. He went back to his normal life.
Good for him. Do I need to go? Do I need to pick this now? You both went?
Sure.
Yeah, we
Gastelum
both went.
Curtis.
If you'd like to.
Yeah.
I'm going Chris Curtis, man. Since Chris Curtis came on the scene for UFC when he knocked out Phil Hawes back in 21, I'm a believer in this guy. And he came to the UFC late. He's already 35, but he's 30-9 as a pro. He is now 4-1 in the UFC. He dropped a decision to Jack Hermanson, but he beat Phil Hawes by knockout. He TKO'd Brendan Allen. And he just recently knocked out the powerful and dangerous Joaquin Buckley. So that being said, combined with the fact that Kelvin Gastelum seems to be on a skid of his career, he has lost 5 of his last 6 fights. It helps Gastelum that as a middleweight, and Gastelum is a guy who I have always thought should try to get back down to 170. Because he's only, 5'8", 5'9"?
Ain't happening now.
Very undersized middleweight. But it helps him in this weekend that he's fighting another somewhat undersized middleweight with Chris Curtis being only 5'10". That being said, I'm a believer in Chris Curtis, and I think that Gastelum's on a slide. I think Chris Curtis is good just about everywhere. Yes, Gastelum has always had great striking, very talented striker, underrated power, as Mark alluded to. I'm going with Chris Curtis, though. I think he's going to get it done by UD. I think he's going to take 2 out of 3 rounds. I'll say 29-28, Chris Curtis. All right, here we go. Speak of the devil, Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Christian Rodriguez. Raul Rosas Jr., El Nino Problema, the 18-year-old out of Santa Rosa, California. Let me say that again. The 18-year-old out of California. The youngest fighter ever to sign with the UFC? That's
Correct.
true, right?
Yep.
Because he signed when he was still 17. Jesus. That's crazy. That really is crazy. He is 7-0 as a pro. He won on Contender Series. He beat a guy that I announced once, a guy named Mando Gutierrez. I announced him at XFC. And then he defeated Jay Perrin by submission via face crank back in December. And now he's back for his third UFC, technically second UFC venture. Taking on Christian Rodriguez, also a prospect, 25 years old, out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Trains at Rufus Sport. He's signed to Pettis' management company, Showtime Management. He's 8-1 as a pro, 3 knockouts, 4 subs. He is 1-1 so far in the UFC. Lost his UFC debut to Jonathan Pierce. Then he got in the win column over Joshua Weems back in October. Okay, that being said, Mark, start us off. Give us your take. Rodriguez versus El Nino Problema, Raul Rosas Jr.
So Rosas favored here, as you'd expect. He's minus 240. Christian Rodriguez is plus 190. It's a 2-inch height advantage for Rosas, but a 4-inch reach disadvantage. So that's pretty unique. He gets a dude here who's pretty skilled, it seems, from what we've seen thus far out of Christian Rodriguez. He goes for it in there. He has some solid grappling himself. Even in his loss with Jonathan Pierce, he pushed him to a decision. He looked really good in his recent win. So I wouldn't say that it's some layup, but judging off of how Rosas looked against Jay Perrin, I don't know that Rodriguez is ready to handle the grappling attack that Rosas brings, as much as he's a good grappler in his own right. I don't feel like there's really any reason for Rosas to even play around on the feet, though he probably could. But I think that he can just overpower Rodriguez and bring this thing to the mat a few times, and that he can find a sub after a couple of them. He seems like he is that naturally gifted in the grappling. So I will go with Raul Rosas Jr. by round 2 submission.
Omar.
Yeah, man. The submission grappling from Rosas Jr. I think is pretty legit. He trains out of 10th Planet, Las Vegas, which is, another one of the branches of Eddie Bravo's discipline and his approach to BJJ, which is very unique and very, very. They're very into a lot of position over submission, but their approach to the submission game is also very unique. You're not going to, they have names, specific names that are very unique to their attacks and their things that you won't really find at any other gyms, like, the electric chair and the banana split and all kinds of crazy shit over there at 10th Planet. So their approach to the game is a little bit more unorthodox and a little bit more creative than I think some of the other gyms are. And I think we've been able to see some of that success from Rosas Jr. so far. So I think I'm going to keep riding that train for now. He looks good. I know they're giving him a lot of hype. I don't know if he's as good as the hype is suggesting. But the kid looks good, man, and he brings a ton of confidence behind it with him. So I'm going to ride with it. I'll go Rosas Jr. by first round submission.
I think somebody's got to bring the Rosas Jr. train to a halt, at least briefly. And I'm going to say that Seat Rod is going to do that. I think this is going to be a grappler's delight. I also like the grappling skill of Rodriguez, and I will say that he's going to hand Rosas Jr. A submission loss, I'll say round 2. Omar is shaking his head in disgust.
I'm just trying to figure out. We give you a fucking 18-year-old, and now you want to pick the guy that's older? Now this is the one you want to pick the older guy in? I don't understand you, Mike. I don't get it. I don't get it.
That's great. That's great.
Okay, let's move on. Whew, fun one.
Oh, yeah.
Welterweights, Kevin Holland versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. Kevin Trailblazer Holland, the 30-year-old out of Fort Worth, Texas. He is 23-9 with 1 no contest, 13 knockouts, add 6 submission finishes to that. He's looking to get back in the win column as a welterweight, having dropped his last 2 fights to Stephen Thompson and before that, Khamzat Chimaev. Santiago Ponzinibbio, the Argentine dagger, 36-year-old out of Argentina. He's 29-6, 16 knockouts, 6 subs. Both of these gentlemen are fucking bangers. He's coming off a win against Alex Morono back in December. Omar, start us off. Ponzinibbio versus Holland. What's your take? What's your pick?
I don't know if you guys sent it to me or my wife sent it to me. I can't find it now. But I feel like I read something that Kevin Holland posted about how Ponzinibbio was like, hey, so I know we're supposed to fight at 170, but like, how about we just make a catch weight and we just have some steaks tonight so that we can just eat and not have to cut weight? So I'm sure he was playing around, or he like DM'd him on Instagram or some shit like that. I thought it was really funny. But this is a great fight, man. This is a really, really, really good fight. I think it's I think on both sides of the fence, although Ponzinibbio might have been in the UFC a little bit longer, obviously he had some time off. But I think they're both at relatively similar points in their career, especially in the rankings. And I think this is a big fight for both, man. I think if Ponzinibbio gets a win over Kevin Holland, that's a great name to have on the record. And vice versa. If Kevin Holland were to beat Ponzinibbio, that is an excellent name to have on your record. I think it's a really interesting fight to have. Both guys have shown different issues in the cage along with their successes. Ponzinibbio has kind of seemed to maybe not be on the same level that he once was at, kind of missing a step. Lost to Jeff Neal, lost to Michel Pereira, was able to beat Alex Morono, but that was after, a hard-fought fight that I'm not even really sure if he was winning.
He wasn't.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to say kind of what Ponzinibbio we should be expecting here, but if he's anything like the last 3 fights, we may expect a Ponzinibbio that might be wanting. Kevin Holland, on the other hand, although he has lost to Chimaev and Stephen Thompson, the Chimaev one, that whole storyline and that whole process was fucking crazy. The whole change of opponent, the weight issue, the whole thing was crazy. So I don't even really know how much value I put into that loss. And on top of the fact that Chimaev is already running through people like a meat grinder as it was. The Stephen Thompson one, however, I think was more about his approach to the fight than his actual ability to win that fight. He wanted to play games and he wanted to stand up with one of the best strikers in the UFC and not utilize all the tools that he had, and he paid for it. I think if he were to play the same approach against Ponzinibbio, very well might run into a lot of the same roadblocks, but I don't think, especially after the amount of shit he got for that Stephen Thompson loss, I don't think he's going to approach it the same way, and I think we will see a more well-rounded Kevin Holland. And so as a result, I think Kevin Holland is better at this point in their careers based on what we've seen. So I'm going to go with Kevin Holland here by unanimous decision. I think he pieces up Ponzinibbio.
Okay, Mark, what's your take? What's your pick?
Okay, Kevin Holland minus 260 as the favorite. Pons is plus 210. There are 3 inches of height and 8 inches of reach on the side of Kevin Holland. He better win this fight. If he does not, I throw up my hands on this man. Like, Pons is good. I love Pons. He's an absolute dog. He just showed that against Morono with that comeback. But he also showed, as Omar touched on, what a lot of his current weaknesses are in that fight. And if Alex Morono can handle him the way that he was, He dropped him twice in that fight. Kevin Holland better be able to do the same thing if he intends to matter at welterweight. And I know I'm a fan of Kevin Holland, and you can hear my frustration because I thought he could have beat Stephen Thompson if he fought that fight differently. And I sincerely hope he steps up to the plate here and wins a fight that I believe he should win. Because even in that Wonder Boy fight, he showed how good he is. He was battling with Wonder Boy on the feet before hurting his hand. He wouldn't even grapple, and it was still a close-ass fight. And Pons is a guy who does get hit. As I said, Alex Morono dropped him twice, and Alex Morono is not that guy. Kevin Holland carries way more power than Alex Morono is. So give me the reach of Holland. Give me the power of Holland. Hopefully a Holland who is in there to push his advantages. And I think that means a finish. I'm going to say club and sub, which I feel like I do often for Kevin Holland, but he just is that kind of guy. I will say club and sub, round 2, Kevin Holland.
Yeah, I'm definitely rooting for Kevin Holland, although I'm definitely a Ponzinibbio fan. I mean, the guy's just such a fucking warrior. Warrior. We need some water. I will be taking Kevin Holland. But I'm with you, man. If he loses to Ponzinibbio, if he gets outworked, man, that'll be taking a lot of stock out of Kevin Holland at welterweight. He went 8-4 with 1 no contest in the UFC at middleweight. But after his first back-to-back losses to Brunson and Vettori, and then a no contest with Kyle Dawkins due to the accidental clash of heads, Holland said, I'm going to cut to welterweight. It actually was a return to welterweight. And he won his first 2 at welterweight very impressively, finishing both Alex Cowboy Oliveira and Tim Means. Then he stepped in with a matchup change against Chimaev. Was he supposed to fight D-Rod or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then, he got run over by Chimaev, and he succumbed to the Chimaev wrestling onslaught. And then he just kind of got outshined by Wonderboy. And Wonderboy ended up kind of drubbing him before his corner stepped in, which was a real heat. I think more of a heat check than a 170 Chimaev at 170, losing to Thompson. I mean, look, Thompson is Thompson, man. He's just he's a unique guy at 170 pounds with the style that he brings. And it was the matchup, and it was also Thompson's striking skill. That being said, I'm still a believer in Kevin Holland's skill set, his talent, his attributes, his size, especially at 170 pounds. I'm going to be taking him. I'll say that he gets Ponzinibbio out of there. I'll say round 3 TKO for Kevin Holland. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. Let's go on. Whew. What a fight this is. Is this a bantamweight bout?
Yep.
Yeah, bantamweight. Okay.
This fucking fight is ruining my life.
I bet.
Who is Omar going to pick? The suspense is killing me.
Okay, Rob Font taking on Adrian Yanez. Rob Font, 35-year-old, out of Boston, Massachusetts. 19-6 as a pro. 8 knockouts, 4 subs. Looking to get back to the win column, dropping 2 fights to the legend, Jose Aldo, and Marlon Chito Vera back in April. Adrian Yanez, 29 years old, out of La Porte, Texas. 16-3 as a pro. 10 knockouts, 2 subs added to that. I forgot to count how many fight win streak he's on. Omar, maybe you know. But after winning on Contender Series, he is undefeated, 5-0 in the UFC. Most recently finishing Tony Kelly back in June of 2022.
9-fight win streak.
9-fight, thank you.
Correct.
Omar, start us off. Your boy, Adrian Yanez, taking on the very tough and very talented Rob Font.
Yeah, man, this is balls for me. As far as the fight is concerned, I think this is going to be a hell of a fight. I think both of these guys might be some of the more technical stand-up fighters that we see, especially in the boxing realm. They love to scrap. They love to throw hands. I think we'll see some kicks here and there, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's just a ton of movement and a ton of hands getting thrown. you know, I'm a fan of Rob Font. I've been a fan for a while. You know, I didn't choose him against Chito Vera because Chito Vera is my boy. But the man only loses to the elite. I mean, he only loses to the guys who are at the top of these divisions, man. And I love Yanez. I've loved everything that he's done. I mean, you see it. Any performance that he's ever had that we've talked about on here, man, I'm always about Adrian Yanez. I talk about him more than anybody else when we have these conversations and he comes up. I don't know if this is the one that he's going to break through on. I don't. Shit, I really don't know. I really don't know where this fight's going to go, man. It really could go either way. I think Rob Font's experience could be the differentiating factor, but the reality is Yanez is more than capable of landing and putting hands on Rob Font. Gun to my head, I will go with Rob Font by split decision, but I hate it all. I hate everything about it.
Wow, I eat my words about saying
I know.
I was going to pick.
Wow, you didn't pick with your heart.
Kudos to you. You made a real pick right there.
I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry. Mark.
Okay. The favorite, somewhat surprisingly to me, I guess maybe not because of the hype, but it is Adrian Yanez. He's minus 180. Rob Font is plus 150. There's 1 inch of height, 1.5 inches of reach on the side of Rob Font, so not anything huge. It honestly feels like it should be more. Like when I'm imagining them each in my head, I thought Font was going to have a bigger reach advantage than 1.5, but he does not. And yeah, this is hard. And the main reason it's hard is because if I remove Davy Grant from Adrian Yanez's resume, the dudes he has fought, Contender Series, Brady Huang. Then in the UFC, Victor Rodriguez, Gustavo Lopez, Randy Costa, and Tony Kelly. None of those guys are in the UFC. The only name on his resume is Davy Grant, who is legit, but he ain't Rob Font. So my point is, and I've said this before on this show, they skipped some steps here. Going to Rob Font. It is a very big jump, and because of that, I'm finding it a bit hard to evaluate because I feel like the only thing I have to go off is obviously how good Yanez has looked, but is like running back that Davy Grant fight in my head, which was a close fight.
Yeah.
So it's really tough to imagine how he is going to do across from a guy on the level of a Rob Font. And as Omar said, Font has only lost to studs, and he's a stud himself. But I always find myself when I analyze Rob Font fights coming back to how effective I think his jab will be against that particular opponent. Because his jab, I feel like, dictates everything else he does. And I don't think I see Adrian Yanez getting stuck behind a jab for long enough. I know we've seen him struggle with jabs before. He struggled really bad early with Randy Costa's jab, and he struggled with Grant's early. But it doesn't continue. He adjusts. I think his boxing IQ is too high to get stuck behind Rob Font's jab long enough for Font to win this fight. What I'm debating in my head is if I'm giving more of a 5-round take and forgetting that this is only 3 rounds. I'd be more confident in this take if it was 5. Knowing, like, even if it takes 2 rounds for Yanez to adjust, I think he's got time. 3 makes it a little trickier, but I'm going to stick with it. I just think that he analyzes so well, adjusts, figures it out as he goes. I think he can use his movement. Beautiful counters. I think he takes advantage of some phone booth-type moments where he can step in, body shots, all of it, to rack up points on Rob Font. Not to mention, Rob Font has taken a lot of damage lately. And sometimes you see that add up on guys. Like between Aldo and Chito Vera, he's gotten his ass whipped. So it wouldn't shock me if we see a little more fragility from Rob Font here. But I think Font probably wins early. I think the jab does work early. But I'm going to say Yanez adjusts in enough time to pull this off and take the cards 29-28. Real tough call, though.
Yeah.
Well, we have quite the situation on this show because Omar picked against Adrian Yanez, and both Mark and I are taking Adrian Yanez. And I'm not trying to like rub it in. I'm just wanted to say I'm a big believer in Adrian Yanez, and it definitely gives me pause that the previous opponents, save David Grant, are no longer in the UFC. But I think that he has the skill set to be elite at 135 pounds. And it's a great point that Mark made that Raul has absorbed a ton of damage in his last two fights. So I'm going to go with Adrian Yanez. I'm going to say he gets it done by unanimous decision on scorecards. And Omar, I'm sorry.
Man, the thing that really gives me pause about picking Adrian Yanez is the footwork. Adrian Yanez is very good when it comes to boxing and landing strikes and analyzing and adjusting. But Rob Font is just more mobile, and he always has been. And I think that's going to make him the more difficult fighter to find. I think, and we've talked about this in the past when we did the Aldo and we did the Chito Vera previews, where we talked about how their power was going to make the difference. That Rob Font would try to put on volume against guys who can just basically barrage him forward and interrupt those attack patterns, that momentum and that mobility. I don't think Adrian Yanez has that same type of like cannon power in his hands. I think he's also very much a volume fighter, and that's not to say Adrian Yanez doesn't have power, because that's obviously not true. But I don't think he's a juggernaut like that, right? Where he throws one punch and somebody's going all the way back to the cage because of the power that it had behind it. I don't think that's him. Adrian Yanez is very much technical, right? He does find angles. He cuts angles, and he's always landing shots. He's always trying to put combos together. He's also not a type of guy to throw one punch at a time. Definitely relies on his combinations. But I just think Rob Font's physical movement, his lateral movement around, jabbing around, I think that is what's going to edge the fight out for him. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination this is going to be dominant one way or the other. I don't think anybody's running anybody over. I don't think anybody is walking away with a clear 30-27 victory. I think this is going to be a really, really close fight, a really well-contested fight, and I just think the movement is going to be just that deciding factor in the end.
Okay, buddy.
Absolutely.
Thanks for elaborating more why you're picking against Adrian Yanez.
Fucking asshole.
Okay, co-main event time in the welterweight division. Gilbert Burns taking on Jorge Masvidal. My goodness, what a matchup! These guys are around the same age, both in their mid-30s, like me. So I don't know who I'm taking.
Are they mid-30s? I think 38.
Jorge's like late 30s.
Mid to late, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Gilbert Dorino Burns, 36-year-old out of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He's 21-5 as a pro, 6 knockouts, 9 subs added to that. Coming off of a submission victory over Neil Magny back in January, just a couple months ago. He will be standing across from Jorge Gamebred Masvidal, the 38-year-old out of Miami, Florida. 35-16 as a pro, 16 wins by knockout. Coming off of a 3-fight losing streak, unfortunately, to Usman and Colby Covington. Covington fight was back in March of last year. So hasn't fought in a little over a year. Man, oh man. Mark, why don't you start us off? Give us the odds and then your opinion of how this fight is going to play out and the pick.
So, obviously I knew the favorite would be Burns here. I think this is a little excessive. He is minus 490. Jorge Masvidal is plus 360. Kind of thought it'd be at least a little tighter than that. There is 1 inch of height and 3 inches of reach on the side of Jorge. And here we go. Jorge Masvidal gets a fight in his hometown in Miami with a golden opportunity to possibly punch a ticket and jump the line to fight Leon Edwards, or even to set up a rematch with Colby if they do Colby and Leon first and Colby happens to win. All he's got to do is get this one win, and he's right there. And you know the crowd's going to be nuts. You know the Scarface walkout is going to be hype as hell in Miami. And then I think it's all going to go downhill when the bell rings. I just don't see this going Jorge's way. First off, Gilbert Burns is a hell of a striker in his own right. But secondly, and more importantly, remember what Gilbert said after he beat Neil Magny. He said he is coming to sub everybody, which really indicated to me that he has shifted his game plan to take advantage of his greatest skill, which is his jits. And if that's the case here, and if he comes in looking for a takedown and doesn't let Jorge get comfortable on the feet, I think this is a real tough night for Jorge Masvidal. If Gilbert plays around with Jorge on the feet, everything changes. Like I said, Burns is good there too, but he can be hit. We've seen that plenty of times, and this fight to me becomes an absolute toss-up if Gilbert Burns goes the fun, engage on the feet type route. But I think he comes in looking for the takedown, which means Jorge's going to be thinking about it. In his last fight with Colby, where he got out-grappled, that was the most frustrating night, I think, of his whole frustrating fight and night, I guess. I think of his whole life. He does not want to be in that spot again. So I think he's going to be thinking about the takedown, which prevents him from flowing as freely as he'd like in the striking. And I even think it could let Gilbert land something big on Jorge, like an overhand type thing as Jorge's reacting, or being conscious of that takedown. But I think one way or another we see this hit the mat, whether it's from a takedown or a knockdown. And I think Gilbert's going to shine there. I really do. I'm all in on my hope of Jiu-Jitsu Gilbert trying to make a run here. And I know Jorge never gets subbed, but I'm going to say he does. I am going to say that Jiu-Jitsu Gilbert is a future title challenger. I can't speak during this preview here, but I'm going to go Gilbert Burns, round 2 submission.
Omar.
Well, this is going to be my last logical pick for the night, because the next one is going to be all logic or all heart. I almost feel like Gamebred is gaslighting me when I hear him talk about how he could really beat Gilbert Burns. How like he's supposed to beat Gilbert Burns. How could he not beat Gilbert Burns? And in my head, I'm like, what do you mean, dog? Like, Gilbert Burns will fucking destroy you. Like, Gilbert Burns is a monster. I don't know if we're looking at the same guy here. You know what I mean? Like, I get you need to have your confidence, but like, I hope he knows full well that Gilbert Burns will fucking murder him. I hope he knows. Burns' jiu-jitsu is really nasty, and to follow up on your point, Mark, about Jiu-Jitsu Burns showing up, I don't think we're seeing Jiu-Jitsu Burns never not show up again. And I don't know if we talked about it before on here, or maybe I talked about it to my wife, or if we talked about it in our text message thread, but Burns' days of the Chimaev fights, I believe, are over. His wife gave him an earful after that Chimaev fight.
Yeah, we talked about it on here. Yeah,
we did, right? It was us, yeah. Chimaev, after that Chimaev fight, his wife was like, no more of that bullshit ever. No more. And so he's, after the Neil Magny fight was the beginning of his, I can't fight the way I fought the Chimaev fight ever again. Like, my wife was not okay with it. And he doesn't need to fight that way. He doesn't need to be stupid, because that wasn't the smartest. It was a fantastically entertaining fight. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
It just wasn't smart on either one of their parts, to be fairly honest.
For just a quick interjection, of all the dripping in accolades type jiu-jitsu dudes who have come to MMA, you could say that he relies on his the least.
Yeah. Totally. And hopefully that's not the case going forward. But I will say, if it does end up going to the ground and it does end up being a jiu-jitsu fight, The thing that Masvidal always has a problem with, I don't know if he gets submitted because he did, survive against Damian Maia, which is not an easy feat in and of itself. But at the same time, Masvidal has no aggressive submission wrestling, right? There is no counter once you get down to the ground. And once you're down to the ground, Masvidal will just purely be surviving. There will be no fight from Masvidal on the ground, if that makes sense, right? It's going to be purely Burns looking for an opportunity and Masvidal trying to stop those opportunities from happening. But at no point is Masvidal going to be looking for opportunities to do what Gilbert is looking to do, right? Submissions or ground and pound or whatever the case is. Like, Masvidal will be purely in defensive mode if he's on the ground. And it's hard for me to see Gilbert Burns not being able to get at least one takedown in that fight to cause some real issues going forward. There is something to be said about the fact that Gilbert Burns is not a wrestler. He works with a lot of wrestlers at ACT, and I'm sure he's got some experience there. But like, we're not seeing GSP blast doubles from Gilbert Burns, right? At best, we might see some body locks into trips. We might see potentially a single leg, maybe. A couple of creative ways to take people down that, we see a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, but we're not seeing the Colby kind of takedowns. We're not seeing the Kamaru kind of takedowns from Gilbert Burns, I would imagine. I still think it's a tall order for Jorge, man. On paper, Jorge's got, I guess, a puncher's chance or however you'd want to call that. He's definitely got the ability to lay Gilbert the fuck out if he lands. Yep. But trying to land something clean on a guy who's not really trying to let you fight is going to be a tall order. And one that Masvidal has shown time and time again he can't rise to that occasion. Between Colby and Kamaru, those were two guys that had no intention of letting Jorge Masvidal fight. And he had no way of stopping them from doing that to him. So I think it will be very similar in this Gilbert Burns fight as well. And I think Burns takes a decision all 3 rounds, riding him on the ground.
Yeah, man. If you're an MMA fan, how do you not love both of these guys? Yeah. Masvidal, such a veteran, such a legend. And I mean, a guy who's experiencing quite a bit of success, quite a bit of late career success. Man, yet another example of a guy who was kind of bordering like kind of journeyman-esque status, lightweight, welterweight, and then one fucking flying knee sends this man into the stratosphere of stardom. Well deserved. Right after knocking out Darren Till. But man, that flying knee over Ben Askren, man, it made him.
I would still consider him a journeyman, to be honest. He's just probably the one that has found probably some of the most success out of the journeymen that we may know of.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think that flying knee kind of broke him out of that status. And I mean, a journeyman, it kind of carries a bit of a negative connotation. So
yeah, it's such a tough word because it can mean so many things.
Yeah, I guess for
like
me,
I just called
journeyman
Daniel
has
James
always...
a journeyman before, so like we're certainly not calling
right
Masvidal one in that capacity, but like in a different capacity, you can call him that. You know what I mean? It's like it's a hard one.
I think for me, journeyman has always been a guy who, there are guys like Colby and like Kamaru who come in with all of these fucking accolades, all of these things, and it's like you expect nothing but for them to reach the top of the mountain, right? And then you've got guys like Jorge Masvidal who come from the streets, who don't have a wrestling background, who don't have a jiu-jitsu background, who, literally have sandpapered their ass all the way up into the elite of the elite. I mean, who would imagine that a street fighter from the backyards of Miami would not only go on to have a great MMA career, but also be able to stop submission murderers like Damian Maia? I mean, nowhere would you think that a guy who grew up literally barnyard or bare knuckle boxing in fucking jorts would be able to stop Damian Maia from subbing him. Okay?
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's the journeyman part for me, I think is kind of a compliment in my opinion, because I think he's surpassed any expectation that I think anybody's ever had of him based on where he comes from, right? Again, if you look at guys with the collegiate accolades and all these other stuff, I think there are expectations that are put on them as a result. But Masvidal has made his way up, man. He, like I said, journeyed. He's journeyed his way through this entire life of MMA, and he's done really well for himself. He's made a name for himself. And you're right, it took a long time for him to be respected with the accolades and the things that he's been able to do in MMA late in his career. And I think he's finally getting it now, and I'm happy for him. But I just think he's about to run into a real bad brick wall with Burns.
I agree with that whole take, but you have changed the definition of journeyman.
Did I?
A journeyman means like someone who's like gets the job done, but they're not fantastic. Like that's like if you Google journeyman, that's what that means.
Oh, well, that's a stupid fucking definition for journeyman.
Yeah, like a journeyman in like a different sport, like in the NBA, it's a guy who has played. He goes on a journey because he fucking travels the country because he plays for like 10 different teams because he keeps getting traded and waived and.
Yes, and like he matters now and then, but he's never going to be like a factor like that.
Yeah, see, I don't follow any of the sporty sports, so I didn't know
that being said, I take that back. Jorge Masvidal has never been a journeyman, but he was a guy who, at lightweight, he would win a few, lose a few.
Yes, no, for sure.
That being said, I always liked him better at lightweight. I've never loved his move up to 170 pounds. I never felt like he was a giant lightweight who like had a hard time cutting weight. So yeah, even though he has an inch over Gilbert Burns, I think Burns is a much stockier, bigger guy. That combined with the fact of Burns's jiu-jitsu pedigree, yeah, man, it's tough to not pick Gilbert Burns. I am gonna say I think jiu-jitsu Burns shows up, and I think he goes to work, man. Masvidal, I think he's got to strike early, almost a la
Ben Askren.
The Ben Askren fight. I don't think he's going to land something like that on Gilbert Burns, but in that kind of fashion, he's got to come out the gate hot, swinging, hoping to land something significant on Burns. But I see Burns securing a takedown, going to work, doing what he does best. I'm going to say round 2 submission for Gilbert Burns.
Yeah. I think this might be for Masvidal too, man. I think we see him drop the... if he does lose this fight, it would seem apropos to just let it be in Miami. You know what I mean? Drop your gloves in a place where they actually love this man. You know?
He said it.
Seems appropriate.
Yeah.
He said if he loses, that's probably it.
Yeah. And it makes sense.
And he's a busy man. He's got his name on like 3 different promotions now. He's killing
how
it.
good is
He's
fucking Game
killing
Bred
it.
Boxing doing already?
How good? I know.
First of all, I don't know if you guys saw that event. I saw clips of it. I didn't actually get to watch it. But, bro, those motherfuckers were there to fight.
Yeah,
I
man.
mean, they scrapped.
Yeah,
the Aldo and the Jeremy Stevens one has been getting so much buzz about the back and forth between the two of them.
Oh, I got to watch it.
Yeah.
Okay, main event. Let's do this. It is the MMA rematch between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. So the two fought back in November. Their first fight together in MMA. They fought twice before in kickboxing. Pereira got both of those W's, one time knocking out Adesanya. So Poatan, the 35-year-old out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, he is 7-1 in MMA. Only one fight went the distance. The other 6, he finished those opponents. He is on a 7-fight win streak. So he lost his first fight in the sport and has not lost since. Israel, the last style bender, Adesanya, the 33-year-old out of Nigeria. He's 23-2 as a pro, 15 knockouts of his own. Of course, he's coming off of that loss, looking to get his UFC middleweight title back. Omar, start us off. Give us your take. Adesanya versus Pereira. Here we go.
This is the one where I am not choosing against Israel Adesanya. If we go down, we go down, kid. The ship goes down, Titanic style. I'm ready for it. It is what it is. I'm gonna ride with him, man. I think Israel had a good performance in the first fight. I think a lot of people give him a lot of shit for whatever reason. I'm assuming it's probably because they don't really like him for whatever reason. But I thought Israel did a really good job in that first fight. Obviously, I think he took he cracked Pereira at the end of that first round.
Yeah.
had him on wobbly legs. Had he had, maybe 30 seconds longer, that fight could have definitely been done.
Not even. I think 5 seconds longer.
Yeah. And as the fight went on, man, I thought Izzy was getting the better of some of the exchanges. I thought his distance management was a lot better than Pereira was. And I think it got to a point where at the end of that fight, Pereira just caught him. I really think that's what it was. And I think Izzy fucked up. He had a momentary lapse in his abilities and what he was doing and his focus, and it cost him the entire fight. And I don't think that makes Pereira a better fighter than Israel Adesanya, but it does make Alex Pereira just a dangerous man to be across from. Obviously, that man is gigantic. He hits like a fucking truck. He is, I think, significantly bigger than Israel Adesanya is from a weight perspective. And it presents a lot of issues when it comes to the power, especially when you have a referee who knows this as well and is having to take that into consideration as to when he needs to stop the fight. I don't know. I still don't necessarily agree with the stoppage because I do think Israel was still moving and still trying to avoid punches. And there's always going to be the argument that, the referee saved him from any future damage. And I mean, I'm sure that that's true. But the consistent argument that I've heard for that is that they had to take into consideration the fact that Alex hits like a beast. Like if that was Colby Covington, they probably wouldn't have stopped that fight. Right. Just in terms of the pillow hand bullshit. So with that being said, I think that Israel has to be even more prepared for this fight. I don't think the mental aspect of it is going to get the better of him. I think he's still going to be well-grounded here in this fight. From a mental perspective, I think he'll be prepared. And I think he's going to come out on top, man. I still don't think he's going to be able to knock him out, but I do think he's still going to be able to get 3 out of the 2 rounds here, hopefully. And I'm going to ride with Izzy on this one, man. Unanimous decision.
Okay, Mark, take it away.
So the challenger is the favorite. Izzy is minus 140.
I can't believe that.
Believe it, baby.
Alex Pereira is plus 115. Now, I don't know what the line opened at. So that's not guaranteeing Vegas set Izzy as the favorite. It may have just been that they were like pick-a-mish and money came in Izzy's way from the public. But yeah, minus 140 Izzy, plus 115 Pereira. I am taking Israel Adesanya.
Wow.
I do not believe this man can go 0-4 in 4 fistfights with Alex Pereira. I just don't. Omar said a lot of this already, but I think Izzy showed in the last fight that he's the better overall fighter. Like, of course, it went south for him late, but I still think he's the better fighter. He was picking Pereira apart. He had Pereira frustrated. He was mixing in the wrestling beautifully. Pereira couldn't do anything about it. I don't see any reason he can't do all of that again. I do think he'll kick less. Pereira checked a ton of kicks last fight, and Izzy paid for it, as we know.
Yeah.
But I think he mixes in the wrestling again. I think he maybe pushes a little bit more of a pace than you usually see from Izzy so that Pereira can't play as much of his Terminator-type game and maybe has to back up a bit more now and again. And I think he's going to put Pereira down. Remember, he almost did it last fight, as we just said. Round 1, 5 more seconds. Would have been over in favor of Izzy. And I know Pereira's frightening, and he's enormous for this weight class, and he's a weight bully, and that he carries this silly, silly power. But I just think Izzy is better, and I'm going to pick the guy that I think is better. If Pereira does this again, I'm going to have to eat my words and just accept that he's this good. But this is a guy who had a really competitive fight with Bruno Silva. And Israel Adesanya is leagues ahead of Bruno Silva. And again, he showed it all of last fight until things went south late. And I maintain that the drop foot scenario is the only reason that they did go south. Izzy couldn't move anymore, and not being able to move in front of Pereira is the scariest situation I can imagine, and that's where Izzy got stuck. And it still shouldn't have been fucking stopped. But anyway, I think Izzy does it in style this time. I think he fights a little freer, knowing that he already lost and that this is his last shot, and whatever happens in here happens. I love the way he has handled this loss for what it's worth. And yeah, I think he fights a little freer, a little bit more of a pace, throws a few more, maybe what you would call risky shots, and finds one that closes the show. I say Izzy takes back his belt round 3 TKO.
Fuck yeah.
Mike, go ahead and rain on this parade.
I am. You felt it, huh?
Yes, I knew.
I cannot believe that Pereira is the underdog in this fight. I just can't believe it. The guy has defeated the man in fighting 3 times now. What do you mean he's the underdog? Are they crazy? As much as I love Izzy, man, and I love him, he's one of my favorite fighters. I just can't. I can't pick him in this fight. I just can't. I think that Pereira has already shown that he's better. He's better in the context that within a fight, he will do what he has to do to defeat this man. Yes, Adesanya was winning throughout most of that fight. I was as excited as anybody when he nearly finished him in the first round. But it's like the cliched phrase. It feels a little cliche to say it. It's like Adesanya's got to be perfect for 25 minutes. It's a hard thing to do when fucking Frankenstein is walking towards you. And I think that Pereira is going to just sort of put an exclamation point on the whole series here between the two of them. I'm going to say he's going to get him out of there even earlier. I'll say he finishes him in the 3rd round. I'll say, 3rd round. TKO. For Alex Pereira. Botan.
And realistically, I think history has kind of shown us that champions who get immediate rematches generally don't really go their way. So there's a lot of things that are against Izzy here on paper. But I'm really hoping, if there's anybody, especially the mental part of things, if there's anybody that I think has a good handle on it, Izzy's at the top of my list when it comes to that.
Yeah, man. I'll be rooting for him, that's for sure.